Hello Comic Army, my name is Chris the Comic Vet. Hope this video finds you safe and well. Recently, my good friend Brian LCS reached out to me and said, "Hey Chris, what would you do to make the Amazing Spider-Man amazing again?" And I thought about it, and I decided to accept that challenge and make this video. So, as a hardcore Spider-Man fan, over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, the Amazing Spider-Man, that particular title itself, has not been that good, in my opinion. Now, there are those that feel the Nick Spencer volume solved a lot of problems, tied up a lot of loose ends. I'm not one of those that necessarily agree with those people and feel that it was all that great to write home about. In fact, I think most of it was actually poorly executed. Recently, Marvel relaunched that particular title, The Amazing Spider-Man, with a brand new volume, with Zeb Wells and John Romita Jr. handling the interior artwork. Now, this one hasn't been that much better at all. And in fact, the artwork, at least when it comes to John Romita Jr., has really been bad. Some of the stories have had some strong issues, but generally speaking, it's not that good. In fact, we were treated to 2 issues where Spider-Man and Black Cat went to the spa. Yes, the spa. And somehow this was published. Now, The Amazing Spider-Man has had some incredible stories throughout its history. Obviously, 1 through 100 was spotlighted with the introduction of so many household name villains. We also had the birth of the Sinister Six in The Amazing Spider-Man Annual Number 1. Later on, through the 100s, we were introduced to the Punisher and the Jackal in the same issue. We actually saw the death of Gwen Stacy, something that's so important to the history of the character. And throughout that time, we actually saw the death of Kraven's series, which is arguably probably the most well-received storyline that The Amazing Spider-Man has had. We also saw in the later annual Peter marrying Mary Jane. So there's been a lot of great moments through the history of The Amazing Spider-Man. There's also been a lot of bad ones. And of late, that's where most of that storytelling lies. One More Day comes to mind. Yeah, that was bad. And then they killed Peter Parker in issue 700. That wasn't that good either. Even though it did give us some great storytelling with the Superior Spider-Man, but that wasn't Peter. That was Dr. Octopus acting as Peter. Again, some interesting storytelling. And then on top of it all, there's the Clone Saga. Anyways, it's easy to point fingers, but let's remember, a lot of these writers are told, hey, you have to incorporate this, you have to incorporate that. So this is actually how I would make The Amazing Spider-Man amazing again. It's time to stop crossing over stories that's happening across Marvel Comics with The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, for example, what would come to mind is like, hey, this particular issue is a tie-in to Secret Wars 2, that kind of thing. We don't need that. Why? Because what Marvel has been doing lately is actually creating a new sub-volume of The Amazing Spider-Man that's usually 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 issues that tie into that big summer or winter event. So we don't need those things to cross over into the Amazing Spider-Man title anymore. It's time to shift gears when it comes to the writers. Zeb Wells is on it right now, and then I believe we're going to be having a new writer, Joe Kelly, take over, and that's fine. But I think it's time we shift gears and we do somewhere between a 6 and 12 issue arc and just let that creative team handle it and then switch teams. That way you can get the most bang for your buck when it comes to storytelling and not just having one editor go over the script and say that it's a good idea. We should probably have a handful of creators go over that script and speak to that particular writer. And I'm talking like bring in powerhouses of the industry and have them go over the script. That way, when that particular team is working on The Amazing Spider-Man, this arc, 1 through, say, 12 issues, we can have a second team creating the next 12 issues and that storyline. And also talking about storylines, make them self-contained for that particular arc. If you want to go longer into a 25-issue arc, okay, you can do that. But Marvel needs to copy what DC has done. DC took their franchise character, Batman, and put their best writers and their best artists on it. Look at Scott Snyder and his terrific run on Batman. And then afterwards, they shifted gears. They gave it to James Tynion IV, who is doing very well outside of Batman. They decided to roll the dice on him, another big writer. And after James Tynion IV, along comes Chip Zdarsky. What else needs to be said? DC's got that formula figured out. And right now we have Chip Zdarsky and Jorge Jimenez handling Batman, and it is terrific. The artwork is tremendous. Yet here we are with The Amazing Spider-Man, with John Romita Jr. doing some terrible covers and some terrible interiors. What I think they sincerely need to do is give it to Philip Kennedy Johnson as a writer for this first particular arc. Philip Kennedy Johnson saved Superman, in my opinion. Superman's stories were not good, and all of a sudden DC switched gears and gave action and Superman to Philip Kennedy Johnson, and they were excellent, heartfelt, action-packed stories. Marvel can learn something from that. Give it to this man, Philip Kennedy Johnson. And if you don't know, he's actually handling the Incredible Hulk right now and doing a great job, in my opinion, with that title. He saved it from the disaster that Donny Cates did in its previous volume. You can take a little bit more of an unknown illustrator that does tremendous work, like Carmen Canero, and have Carmen Canero handle the interior artwork for this particular volume of The Amazing Spider-Man, being written by Philip Kennedy Johnson. That's how I would make The Amazing Spider-Man amazing again. And remove the whole love life from this particular volume. Just have Spider-Man as a grassroots, street-level superhero dealing with Manhattan. Make it something where we get to see Peter Parker exercise his high intelligence. Something that's a little bit of a crime noir. It doesn't necessarily have to be a super big-time villain. Make it a grassroots villain. Make it ground level where the police can't handle it, so Spider-Man steps in to try and do something the best that he can. Make it personal. Have a family involved that's not related to Peter Parker. Have children involved. Have a wife involved. Move forward that way. And then at the end, have whoever's at the helm of this villainy plot be one of the bigger Spider-Man villains, and that issue be action-packed. And at the end, have the hero save the day. Have the villain taken away by the police or locked up in a super prison. And while that second team is creating their new particular volume, everything will be kind of refreshed for The Amazing Spider-Man. You could have the hardcore fan base say this was excellent. You can have that second volume start to tie in a little bit of Peter's private life again. See Peter without the mask on while handling something that's a little bit bigger than that previous volume. It doesn't have to be silly. It doesn't have to be interdimensional. We don't have to have clones. Have it Spider-Man taking on one villain and maybe a lesser villain in the background. If you look at Kraven's Last Hunt, it was Peter versus Kraven. But we actually had a secondary villain that a lot of people don't necessarily remember, and that was the Vermin. So when Kraven's life ended, Peter still had to deal with the Vermin to wrap up that 6-issue arc. There's nothing wrong with that this time. And for the love of God, don't make the villain have a twin. Who I propose to have that second arc would be Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzig. These two are just coming off a fantastic story arc with Captain America, the Sentinel of Liberty. And I think if you put together them with a fantastic penciler like Marcus Toe, someone who takes their time with excellent artwork, you could produce a fantastic storyline. And while this particular story is now being published and sent out to the hardcore fans, you could have team number 3 waiting in the wings while multiple people are okaying a script, and then give that to another up-and-coming superstar artist. That's what I think Marvel needs to consider to make The Amazing Spider-Man amazing again. I've often said the best Spider-Man stories right now are actually outside of the Amazing Spider-Man issues. If you take a look at Spider-Man Spider Shadow, a story that was done by Chip Zdarsky, it was very, very well done. Now the artwork, well, to each their own. Pascal Ferry did a little bit of a, shall we say, postmodern type of artwork with that. However, the story was excellent. If you look at Deadly Neighborhood Spider-Man, again, another nightmarish type of Spider-Man story, excellent. And if you even want to flip the script, you can take a look at The Ultimate Spider-Man, where Jonathan Hickman is crafting a brand new Peter Parker, who in his 30s has finally been bitten by the spider. You can now see how easy it is to craft a world of The Amazing Spider-Man when you take your time. And that's what's making The Ultimate Spider-Man so well received. And then you have Miles Morales on top of it all, who I feel is probably the best Spider-Man story going on right now. From the Empire of the Spider to where we are right now with Cody Ziegler at the helm of this particular volume for Miles Morales, there's not that many weak issues, if any at all. So why is it other Spider titles are doing so much better than The Amazing Spider-Man when it comes to storytelling? Is it because, hey, Marvel is kind of pulling it back, not giving their best creative teams to The Amazing Spider-Man because they don't necessarily have the full rights to Spider-Man on film because those rights are owned by Sony? Maybe it's an interesting conspiracy theory, but however, Universal for a period of time owned the rights to the Hulk. And in the last 5 years, we were given one of the best stories Marvel put out in the Immortal Hulk. So hey, those conspiracy theories, maybe they're just that, conspiracy theories. Because when you look at what the Immortal Hulk was, it was incredible. You had Alex Ross, one of the best artists of all time, handling the front cover. Then you had an excellent creative team on the inside with Al Ewing crafting a 50-issue saga that's worth reading at any point. It really lends to the idea that maybe that conspiracy theory isn't all that relevant. Never mind what happened to the Fantastic Four, but that's a story for another day. But I genuinely think how to make The Amazing Spider-Man amazing again is take him down to his bare bones. Keep him in the suit. In the suit that we're used to. Stop changing the damn suit. It's not necessary. And just putting a great writer that can bring the character back. And that's why I think Philip Kennedy Johnson, along with a penciler like Carmen Canero, could handle an excellent, well-crafted crime noir type of Spider-Man story for 6 to 12 issues after a handful of creators say that this is a great script. Because what's happening right now with Marvel, it's not really working out. Because I'm not interested in seeing Spider-Man go to the spa. Thank you so much for your time. Till we see you again. Take care.